Hi, I'm Steve Fryette of Fryette Amplification, and today I want to talk to you about the development of the new 2CP module from SYNERGY. I was invited to join the SYNERGY team for the SYNERGY modular amplifier project pretty early on, and I had already been working with the team on a couple of other things, and so when that subject came up, they asked me if I wanted to be involved, and I said sure. So we were pretty much in on the ground floor, and that meant that we would be involved in the development of the platform, the SYN 2 and the SYN 1. And I say SYN 2 first before the SYN 1 because the SYN 2 was the one that was done first. So I actually did most of the layout inside and drove some of the mechanical development and put in a lot of effort into the interface, the electronics, the sound of it, the functionality of the loop, and those kinds of things. So when that was done, then the question was, okay, what's next? And what next turned out to be the SYN 1. So since we already had the SYN 2 platform, it was a pretty easy transition to the SYN 1. And our idea there was that it would just be a simple little desktop platform that you could use modules with, that you could audition modules, and the assumption that you wouldn't need to be switching a bunch of modules if you're just doing desktop recording. You just select one, plug it in, play, and then do something else later. So that made a lot of sense, and so we proceeded with that. So by the time we got the SYN 2 and the SYN 1 completed, at that point there were already the SYN 1 and SYN 2 on the market and modules already available. All right, what module should we start with? What amplifier should we take it from? And of course, with feedback from the SYNERGY team, which one they would like to see first. The focus seemed to be on the ultra lead. So going to the ultra lead, we had to decide what is it about the ultra lead that makes it special enough to warrant having a module. We decided that it would be a good time to sort of break from the norm of the modules that were coming out and try to do something a little bit extra, I guess. We always try to do something sort of above and beyond, and the idea of cramming a 6-band graphic EQ into a module was not only an attractive idea, and it sounded like fun, but it was a challenge. And if there's anything that drives development around here, it's a challenge. It's something that seems not likely to be possible, or is going to be difficult to accomplish, or is it even going to work? Those are the kind of things that get my juices flowing. So that is what we decided to do. So then once we had completed it and showed it to the team, their eyes lit up and their mouths dropped, and when we got the intended effect that we wanted, which was just a total surprise. That gave us a framework to do more things like that, a little outside of the box. So when SYNERGY came to me and asked me if I'd be interested in doing a new module design that could incorporate a graphic, I automatically knew what they were talking about, and it just seemed like the logical thing to do, and we already had the technology sorted out so that we knew that we could pull it off. And that project was the 2CP module. So going back to earlier in my career, I was working at Valley Arts Guitar in Studio City in the late 70s to early 80s, and that was a real formative period for me in terms of learning the craft and dealing with well-known client base, and sort of being inspired to understand what they were looking for in terms of getting work done, modifications, ideas for new gear. We developed a lot of products there. Valley Arts wasn't really as much a music store as it was just a hub. So everybody came there, And we did a lot more than just repair things. We modified amps, we restored amps, and we had a reputation for doing great work. We had a reputation for knowing what we're doing, and we had a reputation among the manufacturers that they could get good feedback from us about how their products were performing, and what kind of problems we were experiencing, and what kind of feedback they were getting and we were getting from the artists that used the stuff. So it was really an interesting time, and there was a lot of free-flowing information, and all of that led to, you know, guys like Larry Carlton and Carlos Rios, Steve Lukather, Eddie Van Halen was one of our clients, Dwayne Eddy was a client, and Buzzy Featon, and a lot of guys that were really high-profile guys, but they were also very down to earth. And when they came into our store, we were kind of all in the same boat. We sort of, everybody knew what everybody was talking about. So we all sort of spoke a common language. And in those days, there were amplifier manufacturers that were doing cutting edge stuff, and we were dealers for those companies. And one company in particular had a very popular amplifier, and they decided to go into the next phase of development of that amp and come out with a new model. And the next series of that model got a lot of people excited, but it also wasn't really well received initially. A lot of people were like going, it's different than the one I thought I was getting, and they changed this, and it sounds different, and what's all this about? So we had communication with the artists, and we had communication with the factory, and so there was a flow of information all over the place about what people are perceiving, what they're expecting, what they want next, and how they think that it should operate. So there was a lot of that. Being in the thick of that whole thing, I just learned a lot about the amplifiers that were coming out during that period, and there was a lot of them. There was Dumble, there was Jim Kelly, there was the Rivera modded amps, there were the new Rivera Fender amps, there was Mesa Boogie, there was all kinds of companies that were competing for this new space of more versatile, more portable amplifiers for top session players that were doing lots of different music gigs all the time and doing 4 or 5 sessions a day. Had to be small, had to be light, had to perform like crazy, had to sound amazing, and had to be able to do a bunch of different things. So there was a lot of that going on. So it just was coincidental that I ended up working at Valley Arts when all of that was going on. It was like being in the eye of a tornado. So I really had gotten an opportunity to wrap my head around some of those designs inside and out, how they worked, how the manufacturer understood them to be presented, and how the artist understood them to be accepted. And that really ultimately led to the development of our own amplifiers and our own company. So when the opportunity came to get involved in the IICP project, all those bits and pieces of the things that I learned in my career, and the things that we had been doing with the Synergy team, and the development that we had done on the Ultralead, all just sort of came together in a really logical way. We're familiar with the team, we're familiar with the technology, we have a platform, we have experience and historical background, and a deep insight of what would be the right way to encapsulate the performance of the amp that this module is based on into a module. And that in itself is a real trick, especially with an amp like the Ultralead. There's a lot in that amp, and to encapsulate that in a module is challenge enough. To do it on something like this, where there's a lot more people who are familiar with it, who are diehard fans, who have spent their careers playing the amp that this module is based on, there are a lot more people to please. There are a lot more doubters to convince, and there will be some people saying, well, what are your credentials? What is your credibility in developing this? You're a high gain guy, you're the hard hitting super detail, unforgiving amps. Where's your background? So that's why I wanted to cover a little bit about my background, because that's where that comes from. Interestingly, the EQ in the Ultralead was inspired by the EQ in the original Mark series amps, and but in an entirely different way. Consequently, for the same reason, a small compact amplifier has some sonic limitations, restrictions. You have to use a high-powered speaker if you're going to play loud. In a small box like that, the sound can get really compressed and really mid-range focused. An EQ would serve to be able to shape the sound of that little amp and make it sound bigger. Take out some of the things that are too omnipresent and add some of the things that are a little bit lacking. So you shape the whole sound of the amp using that. The difference with this is the preamp is very, very mid-focused. And the legacy of the design of this amplifier was that the way to get sustain and smooth overdrive distortion was just to really emphasize the mids. Once you have established the gain and the saturation sound and the harmonic detail and all that, once you get that going in the tube preamp stage, then you can slice and dice it with the graphic EQ to shape it to your liking, which is exactly what happens here. That part of the that part of the design process is pretty straight ahead. What's complicated is that the original design is a lot of stuff going on, a lot of gain, close proximity of components, a very small package that it all fits into, and because all the gain stages are maxed out so much in the high gain mode, the close proximity of components and where those components are placed is really magnified, and the same happens in the module. Of course, it's a really small compact area. Some of those same tricks to maximize the performance of all the stages and get the right kind of weird interactions that contribute to its signature sound, and while eliminating the wrong kind of interactions that cause oscillation and ugly distortion, that takes knowing how to do really good circuit board layout. The original amps were circuit board layouts, and they were very innovative because they were done in an unusual way, knowing that all of these components in a tight space like that tend to talk to each other. And then, so you have to plan for that. So that was always my background, and so I already had that skill set, and that really helped in the development of this. And then the other thing is the original amp had all the pull pots and switches, and a lot of those things were things that people just sort of set a certain way, and everybody kind of sets it that way, so they don't necessarily need to all be there as long as their circuit behaviors are accounted for. So we had to pick and choose among those which ones are going to be accessible, which ones the people most want to have access to, and which ones can we just leave fixed as part of the personality of the preamp sound. Now you got to remember that it was never a two-channel amp. It was a one-channel amp with an overdrive stage laid on top of it. And so the signal path is kind of binary, and then there's a detour. And you have to be able to get the distortion sound right, and the sustain right, and the mid-range right. But then when you turn all that off, that original clean, open, wide open personality has to remain. So all of that is a really delicate balancing act. And again, that goes back to having been there at the beginning when all that was being formulated, and seeing it in real time was the really important aspect of designing this and knowing why you're doing things the way you're doing them. The beauty of it is we went through it all the way to get the best parts of the stew together and apparent. And so we'll just see how it goes from there. One of the fun aspects about doing this project is that it represents culmination of all the things that I've learned in the industry, the things that I've learned by the relationships that I've built with peers, competitors, friends, whatever you want to call them. They're kind of all the same thing. In that way, there's a sort of camaraderie there. And I feel like part of the reason that I wanted to be involved in this project is sort of recognize that, and it kind of takes on the feeling of a tribute to my mentors in that way. So the fun part of that is it's sort of an indirect way of saying thank you to the people that influenced the way I think and helped me learn what I learned. And I just want to sort of give them a little tip of the hat and say thanks. So that's the story. Thanks for checking it out. Hope you get a chance to check out the 2CP soon, and hope it lives up to your expectations. See you soon.